Hey everybody, today we're talking about AI reliability with Galileo.ai, helping teams test and monitor and put guardrails around AI systems. Connor, how are you?
Evan, great to see you. I'm super excited for this conversation. There's so much happening in the AI observability and reliability space. And we are all seeing AI in our daily lives. So it's, I think, crucial that we ensure it actually works for us.
You couldn't have said it better. Before that, maybe introduce yourself and your background and your journey to Galileo.
My pleasure. Yeah. So my name's Conor Bronsdon. You can follow me on LinkedIn or reach out to me on X. I also write occasional newsletters diving into everything happening with AI and strategy around tech at conorbronsdon.substack.com. And I lead developer awareness and marketing here at Galileo. We are an AI observability and evaluation company that drives reliability by helping you improve your AI agents, your RAG-based chatbots, whatever it is you're building, through that evaluation of the effectiveness, the observation of is it actually working in production, and then guardrailing against negative behaviors, things like personal identification, leakage, prompt injection attacks, that kind of thing. And yeah, I really entered the AI space through my time first at Microsoft, working on ML and AI solutions in identity and cybersecurity. And then at Linear B before this, where I spent several years working on engineering and developer productivity, specifically for AI-enabled engineering teams. So things like AI-enabled PR review is a big area there. There's companies like Quota and Graphite, and many others are in that space right now, and a lot of exciting stuff happening there. And then joined Galileo a little over a year ago to lead the developer relations and marketing teams here and help drive the whole awareness function. And it's been a ton of fun. We've got a lot of incredible customers like Comcast, like JP Morgan, and many more. So there's, I think, such an interesting space here. And, anyone who is focused on building AI agents, whether or actually building enterprise productionized RAG use cases, what it actually takes to get into production for an enterprise is so different than the flashy demos I think we see. And that's where you have to consider the risk and compliance side of things. And that's where guardrails and evaluations kind of come in. And folks who are building with AI day to day may be hearing about things like evaluation driven development and this perspective on the market. So excited to chat with Evan and hope everyone is finding this conversation valuable.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And at a high level, what makes testing and evaluation of AI so hard right now?
Oh man, great question. The main thing is that LLMs are non-deterministic. So most of us who've been building with software in the last 20 plus years are used to deterministic software. We're used to saying, okay, maybe we have test-driven development if we're really into the testing side of things, and we're working through tests with everything we do. But in the end, we are able to understand and predict what these systems do. That is not the case when you bring an LLM or a small language model like we do sometimes with our evaluations into the system you're building. And that's because LLMs have that non-deterministic magic. They have this massive amount of data they've been trained off of. You're providing them context within your workflows. And this is where this kind of magic piece comes in, where they can create and do things that were outside of your expectations. And often that's very positive. They can say, oh, let me help you solve a problem. Let me help you find this thing you're looking for. Let me act off of and predict what you need based off of my training database. But sometimes they will take a wrong turn. And we've all found this in our individual use cases, whether that's just playing around with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever tool you want to play with. Sometimes it will get something really wrong for you, even if that's just writing a LinkedIn post. And for those who are actually building with AI and are maybe building an AI chatbot to help them understand their notes, or maybe you're trying to actually do something where you are writing regularly with AI, or perhaps you have a customer service chatbot that you're building for work. It is incredibly valuable to help you get through a lot of in the case of the customer service chatbot, let's call it lower level or easier to answer questions. You can save a ton of team time and let people focus on the harder problems. You can let people focus on the architecture of building if you're in the software engineering side. But the problem comes in when you have wrong answers that are breaking in. And while humans can have incorrect answers, there are, I guess, guardrails we've built into our own systems as far as how we manage people, how we assess people to account for this. We have editors, we have reviews, we have various processes we've developed. And that's not always true when we're building AI demos or any sort of AI agents or systems. So it's crucial that we think through the infrastructure around how we enable AI so that we can take advantage of all the opportunities of it, whether that's helping you context engineer your way to a new application faster, whether that's helping you write your content, whether that's helping Evan and I build a talk track for this interview or something else. But actually getting what you need out of it requires you to put in work. It's not simply a magic bullet at all times. You have to provide it context. You have to adjust it, give it feedback, just like you would with a junior employee who has maybe a ton of knowledge and intelligence, but isn't quite there all the way yet. Then we don't have the context that you do within your business. And so I like using this framing of you can usually think of AI as like a junior async digital employee where like, hey, you have to enable them to really get the job. They're very smart. They actually have resources they can draw upon. They're good at research, but you have to give them feedback to really get them all the way there. And sometimes, if you are using one of the frontier models, or if you've already provided some of that context up front, they're a senior employee, they're a PhD level employee, they're extremely intelligent, they have a lot of insights to bring to the board. But they are also very eager to please. They want to jump in and tell you, oh, we found the right answer. Because in the end, what they are is predictive machines that have this massive database behind them. And they're saying, I'm predicting what the answer might be. And unless you really force them to, they will try to solve your problem, whether or not they can actually do so and find the answer. So it's just I think a very complicated black box to unpack, because we don't always see the rationale behind what they're thinking. And so we have to follow their chain of thought. We have to get them to show their steps, show their work, just like I would if I was having helping one of my nephews with the math homework. I'd say, hey, great, you got to your answer. How did you do that? Because I don't know if your process was right. It's also hard for me to tell if the answer's right, even if I have an answer key. So we don't always have that answer key, especially when we're doing frontier knowledge work. So we need to have them show their work. We need to be able to evaluate that work and how it's done. And we need to help make sure that it's reliably what we need.
Oh, so well said. Great insights there. And when you measure AI in production, what are some of the biggest failure modes that you see over and over again? We've all experienced hallucinations, but there's drift and bias and safety and performance. What are some of the sneakiest ones?
Oh, that's a great question. I would think about a few categories, and this isn't comprehensive, but
Mm,
will hopefully give some indicators of things you can look out for. So there are agentic performance issues, which are kind of specific to AI agents. So you can see tool errors, for example, where agents fail to actually execute the tools that are provided to them. Sometimes that'll cause workflow failures. Sometimes that'll simply cause them to seize up and get stuck in a loop. You can see tool selection optimization is a challenge. So maybe an agent has multiple tools available to them. And I would equate this to, as an individual, maybe I could use multiple different LLMs for answering a task. Maybe I have to write an email and I want help writing that email. I could use GPT, I could use Claude, I could use DeepSeek. And maybe let's just say, for sake of argument, that Claude is the best email writer of those three. It has the most context on me. It knows what it's doing here. But because I'm more used to GPT, I keep on using GPT. That is an issue of me using a suboptimal tool. Or in the case of an AI agent, maybe they're using the most expensive tool. And actually that is a bad fit for what you need. Or they are trying to pull information from the wrong areas because they're using this tool. So it can cause both inefficiency and failure. Then you can look at things like, multi-step process management, completion of the actual goal fulfillment. So we've created both out of the box and custom metrics to track, did this agent actually complete our goal here?
mm,
And one of the things we're doing as a company is we have our agent leaderboard that's free and open source on Hugging Face, where you can actually track which LLMs are working efficiently for things like customer service use cases in banking. And you can say, okay, like, are they actually finishing the task? How expensive was it to do it? And I think it's really important for us to not get locked into a single approach here, just like it's important for us not to lock agents in. But it goes way beyond that. Agents are just kind of I think everyone views it as the future and to some extent the present. But there's things like safety and security. Are we protecting sensitive information? Is it getting leaked? That's where guardrails can come in, and actual runtime protection of these agents. sensitive information protection, prompt injection defense, harmful content prevention. And then I think we're all very familiar with this kind of idea of like context and knowledge management. So are we ensuring that our LLMs and their workflows are adhering to the context, or are they veering off and going in the wrong direction? I've made that mistake in personal prompting before, where I gave it some of the wrong context and it decided to use the wrong thing. Can I help validate the ground truth so that it can actually evaluate and assess the accuracy of what's information? Or more complicated things like chunk retrieval. Is that chunk retrieval efficient? Or is it retrieving irrelevant chunks of information to apply and therefore degrading response quality? And there's so many more here. You can see like context injection failures, over-injection, content quality and consistency. Is it actually meeting your brand tone and voice? Or does it have stylistic drift across sessions? This is a common problem for folks who are trying to have a consistent brand voice in how they speak and communicate in content they're generating. Or maybe it's over verbose or oversimplified. We've all probably dealt with that. So I would kind of think about it in at least those 4 buckets are the ones that come to mind for me. That agentic performance issues, usually around tool selection, goal completion, tool latency, that kind of thing. Context and knowledge management, something that I think applies to everyone and has a variety of areas where things can be a little off that lead to challenges. Maybe that's like cross-document parsing. And then safety and security, obvious one that's crucial for enterprises in particular that are trying to do things like customer support and this so-called like low-hanging fruit use cases. And then content quality and consistency. And those would be 4 big areas I would look at as common problem areas. And, we have both out of the box and open source metrics that we're leveraging across those. So in the example of, let's say, brand tone and voice consistency, you might look at tone metrics, or if you're looking at text generation quality against the references provided, you could look at Blue and Rogue, which are kind of common metrics that people have been using in AI for a while. And then I think, really, when you get down to it, to be effective at building enterprise level solutions, you need customization. And it's really crucial that you create custom scores and metrics that can get to what your actual goal is, because it's great for me to provide you a score on, say, tool erroring with your agent and ensure that there's not a ton of tool errors popping up. Great, it's using the right tools. But we actually need to understand, did it complete the action? Is it reaching action completion? And maybe you have a unique ground truth that you need to apply for this because for example, maybe it's let's keep using that banking example I mentioned earlier, banking customer support. Maybe we need to ensure that there's no leakage of personal identifying information around like bank accounts, or that there's been a PIN provided to access those accounts. And maybe there's specific rule sets that you need to apply because there's compliance regulations that banks have that many other industries don't. And so this is where I go back to that context piece where, like, you've probably heard the term context engineering, but I think just understanding context and applying context is maybe the most important thing for folks who are building with LLMs today.
Fascinating. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. You mentioned guardrail policies. How does that work in practice? How do you, balance preventing all those bad outcomes you just described with preserving flexibility and performance and all the good side of LLMs?
Yeah, this is where I think you need to balance your techniques. So typically when we're thinking about leveraging AI, we're thinking about large language models, LLMs. And those can have high degrees of latency because they're calling these major models that typically are not on edge. They're typically not on device. And so this is where you'll see folks like ourselves and others have built small language models. So we built a family of Luna 2 small language models. And these are designed specifically to provide custom guardrails and evaluations in real time at lower latency, lower cost. I'll also shout out, like, we're not the only folks who are examining these kind of approaches. I just think we're doing it best. And frankly, we have the benchmarks to actually back that up. But others can look at like things like Azure Content Safety, or GPT-4o Many is an efficient model for LLM from an LLM standpoint to use this. But when you do that, you're having a higher latency. So like our Luna 2 small language models are getting above 90% accuracy. We're beating benchmarks once they're fine-tuned, and sub 200 millisecond latency. So it's actually real time. And you can say in real time, oh, like this response, if it were to be sent to a user, would actually leak that bank account information. They haven't given us a PIN yet. We need to make sure we stop that. And you can apply custom rules and guardrails to actually ensure that your agents, your chatbots, your AI systems, whatever you are trying to build, are working in production. Because there's only so much that you can catch and plan for in pre-production. And this is the same thing with any software system beyond just an LLM. An LLM just adds upside and downside. But in any software system, you need to ensure production's not breaking. You need to ensure that there's not production problems. There's a reason that we've gone with LLMs as the way of AI instead of trying to have a rule for everything. You can't always have a rule for every use case. And so using small language models like Luna 2 in order to identify when there are problems in production to stop that behavior and surface it, whether that's through an integration with Rootly or some other means of notification through Slack or whatever the most efficient use cases for you, on-call, ServiceNow, et cetera, whatever your enterprise needs. We want to make sure that your on-call team can immediately identify, here's a problem, let's go fix it if we need to, or that you can have secondary tools that get called to actually route this through an LLM to fix what's going on. And I think this also then becomes a fantastic data set to go then retrain your models, update your workflows. And that's where we're seeing the biggest impact is when organizations start with evaluation observability in their, pre-training phase, in their development phase, in their testing. They add the real-time guardrails and runtime protection with Galileo, and then they feed that information back in and also feed in continuous learning through human feedback to auto-tune these metrics, where you can have your subject matter experts actually come in and give a few shot examples that then get applied and update the systems in real time so that we can continue to improve these, both with the feedback from live production systems and with your expertise. And that's where I think we're seeing a ton of success with groups like NTT and customers like Five9 and HP.
Oh, fantastic. That's amazing. I'm curious how you and the team keep pace with all the models and prompts that are constantly changing every day. There's some new every week, new announcement, release.
Oh
How do you
man,
not just keep pace, but try to stay ahead of the curve in terms of what's happening
that
on the
is a
model
tough
side?
one. I wish I had a better answer for you on that, Evan. Maybe you have a better answer for me here. I mean, we have our leaderboard I mentioned where we're trying to keep pace with
Mm,
those top models. And you can check that out on Hugging Face. And I think that's a great way for
mhm.
us to just have public data sets to apply to and make sure we're tracking the top models. We've got some automations we've set up, obviously, to identify when there's new research we need to look at. And we've invested heavily in research ourselves with our Luna papers, our chain pull methodology
Mm.
to improve chain of thought. And I think it's why most AI organizations see research and development as crucial. You can't simply get away with having a product engineering side of your house. You also need to be thinking ahead to where the industry is going. And I'll say a huge amount of credit to our founders, Vikram Chatterjee, Atin Sanyal, and Yash Sheth on this, in that their background with Google, Uber, and Apple has really enabled them to be at the main point of the conversation here. And I think this is where showing up to things like meetups and talking to fellow practitioners, reading those papers or synthesizing those papers with AI sometimes so you can understand what's going on before you do a full paper read, and building in not just some automation, but this muscle within the organization of, we are also a research organization. We're going to think through this research. We're going to understand how it's going to be applied to us, is so crucial, because you'll see posts going viral sometimes on X or LinkedIn, and you'll see that, hey, that paper's from 2 or 3 years ago. Like,
Mm.
for example, there was one I saw on Twitter recently where it was, models perform way better when you prompt in a chain versus all at once, and you kind of make it think through its steps. And I kind of did a double take, and I think a few other folks did. And I started reading the comments, and I was like, yeah, this paper's from 2.5 years ago. I remember reading this 2 years ago. I've been applying that in my own prompt engineering. So it can be really easy for stuff to swing by. And I think there is a big gulf in information as far as people who are on this cutting edge and are
Mm.
really in the nitty gritty details and are building regularly with it, versus folks who are kind of following along or on the farther out edge. I'll give big kudos to you here, Evan. Like, the idea that you are talking to practitioners and leaders about this every day, I'm sure is a huge leg up for you. And that's part of what we try to do with our own Chain of Thought podcast, where we talk to AI leaders.
Oh,
And
we'll have to give you a shout out, because that sounds
oh,
amazing.
please, yeah,
And also, get off of social media, or at least limit yourself, because it's if you're like me and spend 8 hours a day on social, it is soul sucking.
it can
But
get a little tiring.
back to the topic at hand, when it comes to observability, observing, monitoring all interactions, I mean, can you push for 100% sampling, or what? Where do you tend to go in a real enterprise world when you have to deal with cost and latency and privacy concerns and other issues?
Yeah, great question. I think it depends on the type of system you're building. But when you're looking at the type of scale that some of our customers do, small language models are the way to go.
Hmm.
People have probably heard the phrase LLMs judge, if they're at all familiar with the kind of observability space for AI, where you essentially use other LLMs to monitor the work that's happening in these AI systems. That can become really cost prohibitive once you're going past a couple thousand of test traces a day, and you're going, oh, I have a million, customer interactions happening a day. That gets really costly. You don't want to see your OpenAI API bill after that, and that's where you will see a lot of enterprises will come to Galileo and say, okay, help us to fine tune a small language model that can do this at 3% of the cost, per trace of what an
Hmm.
LLM would be doing here. And you can also do things like, okay, let's apply a small language judge across all of our samples. And then when we identify that there might be a problem, we also add an LLM in. And then if it hits a certain level of risk, maybe we then bring in a human to evaluate this. And personally, and I've been saying this since my days at Microsoft, I think this is where the future of AI and ML for things like cybersecurity and guardrailing is going, is
Hmm.
the first line of defense, and we're seeing this with a lot of large solutions, is an AI, whether that's an agent, whether that's an LLM judge, whether that's an SLM, and then we have often secondary levels of AI, and there's a clear strategy for moving it up the chain to, okay, a human needs to take a look at this, because when AI is at its best is when it is enabling humans to do the deep work, to do the strategy work, and provide the context that it needs. And it's an extension of us rather than a replacement. I know there's going to be some folks who are very concerned about what does this mean for the job market, and I would say it is certainly going to change how things work, just as we've seen with previous technological waves. But there is so much upside and opportunity in the space as well, and personally, I find it extremely exciting.
Yeah, there are plenty of jobs for observability experts, for
Totally.
sure. Speaking of which, when a customer is thinking about adopting Galileo, what are some of the hurdles? Because this is a new approach.
Mm.
There are technical challenges, it's cultural, maybe changing the way things have always been done. How do you overcome those, and how quickly can you deploy your platform in a large enterprise? You mentioned very large customers.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of the answer is really depends, right?
Hmm.
And I hate to be so vague at the top level here, but we have customers who are a couple of people using our free solution who've signed up for free on
Oh,
our
wow.
website, Galileo.ai, and it's just like, hey, two developers working together on this. And then we have customers who, like HP and Comcast and others, where it's quite a few more. And uh, it definitely takes longer for those large enterprises to get to scale. Often they'll start with a couple teams, they'll roll it out. Sometimes you'll see them working with their platform engineering team, for example, or their DevOps team will help with the integration of it, and they'll roll it out to different business units. That's one of the reasons we're big on customization and enabling customization, because depending on these large enterprises, they may have not just different custom needs around, hey, I'm Comcast versus NTT. I may have different needs,
Hmm.
but they may also have different needs at the platform and tool level, where maybe they have 8 different products they need to apply us to, or
Hmm.
in some cases thousands of agents they need to apply us to, like DigitalOcean
Hmm.
we work with. And the differences can be at a team and developer level. So we both enable SaaS solutions, hybrid, and then fully managed clusters on-prem for folks who have high compliance needs. And I think this is where having like a very highly audible log structure and key service level agreements is so crucial for that enterprise on-prem piece. For some larger organizations, we even offer forward deployed engineers to help them, and
Wow.
we'll do a lot of that setup with them alongside. But it really depends on the size of the company. If you're a startup, you can get rolling on your own. You can ask us for advice. You can
Hmm.
read a lot of our content. We have, I think, great docs, or at least continuing to become better docs that can really enable you. And you can still do that if you're an enterprise level, but in order to get it across the entire organization, there's definitely some setup work. I love what AI does for us. It is truly magical in a lot of ways, but it is not a magic bullet. It is something that requires work to do right consistently. That's why we're big on reliability for AI.
No shortcuts, as with everything in life.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you measure success.
Hmm.
You're clearly providing important insights and metrics, but what about outcomes? How do you show yourself more than just monitoring, but real delivering real enterprise value?
That's a really great question, Evan. The way I would think about it is, are our customers able to go to production faster with their AI
Mm,
agents? Are they actually getting to production with their AI solutions? Um, that is where we want to have the full spectrum of, but it'll look like things like, do they have more AI features in production? Can we measure that increased team productivity as around us delivering and productionizing more agents? Are we reducing the time spent on things like testing and enabling them to move to the next stage faster? Are we reducing the time on the evaluation they were already doing? Because usually folks are already doing either vibe-based evaluations or basic evaluations in a spreadsheet. So how can we help them reduce that time to
mm,
market? That's one area. And I look at cost too for some of these larger enterprises. Maybe they were already using an LLM across the board to evaluate and observe a lot of their work. Perhaps if we're bringing our Luna 2 SLMs, we can cut those costs down substantially. So it kind of depends on exactly what they're looking for. Not every organization needs a custom SLM, but when they do, we're definitely looking at cost as an area of opportunity. And I would even say for organizations that aren't using our custom SLMs, they are often able to cut costs simply through being able to deliver features faster. And so there's definitely an ROI story there. And then we'll look at risk management as well, of course. So particularly this is true for like financial services, banks, healthcare, where we need to understand if they're meeting their compliance and risk management goals. Because
mm.
typically they have these large enterprise compliance needs. They have regulations they need to follow depending on the location and the countries they're working in. And so enabling them to meet those needs is crucial for us.
Absolutely. Um, and I dare not even ask where you see things going in 5 years. That's like several lifetimes, but you must have a strong idea of your roadmap over the next 1 or 2 years. Can you give us a peek into the near future?
Absolutely. So I think a really exciting thing that we're already playing around with, and there's a couple of good talks by our CTO, Atin, on our YouTube about this, but self-evaluating agents and agents that act as first level evaluators within our platform is an obvious area. And I would say we're not the only ones who are doing this. There's some really interesting ideas and approaches here, but um, I talked a bit earlier about that idea of like, okay, the first level is going to be done by an AI. We're already doing that with
Mm,
judges. Can we have agents that are acting on our behalf and kind of more fine-tuned to your needs, your customized needs? And then starting to have those work better together. It's part of why we worked with Cisco on the agency protocol, for example, to enable inter-agent communication interoperability. And we see that customization and that highly contextual piece as a huge part of what the next year looks like. I'm a big fan of Karpathy's idea that like, look, this is the year of agents, but it's going to be a decade of agents. We're going to keep getting better at the customization. We're going to keep getting better at how they enable humans. We're going to keep getting better at how they have context and making sure they act the way we need them to. And I think that's where we're all in on.
well, incredibly important work. Congratulations on all the
Thanks, Evan.
success so far. It's really impressive to watch. Onwards and upwards.
Thanks, Evan. Super fantastic chatting with you. For anyone who's interested, you can check us out at Galileo.ai. And please feel free to reach out to me at LinkedIn at Conor Bronsdon. I would love to hear from you. Love to hear your feedback. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening, watching, sharing, and also check out the TV show at techimpact.tv, now on Bloomberg and Fox Business. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Connor.
Highly recommend. Thanks so much, Evan.